Welcome, everyone. Like Dino said, how many of you all enjoyed the snow this past week? It's really beginning to feel a lot like Christmas now. I'm originally from the Midwest, so when it first kind of started snowing, really kind of sleeting, my kids were like, "Oh, it's snowing." I was like, you sad Texans, like this isn't real snow. And then it like really started snowing, and I was like, okay, this is like legit snow. This is real. And then it started sticking to the ground, things that don't happen in Texas, you know? And it was like enough. We were actually at one of my kids' performance, and like you could see all the kids are like, we'll do our performance thing, but there's snow. You know, like they all, like afterwards, all the kids were out playing. And I don't know, how many of you guys made a snowman? Any other Olafs that got made? Yes? Yeah. It was great packing snow. And then we all had to watch the snowman die the very next day, right? Like just the sun came out and the snowman went away. Yeah, it was awesome. It really brought me back to a lot of my childhood memories growing up in the Midwest where there's lots and lots of snow. And it reminded me of several things. And one of my favorite Christmas traditions for me growing up was the Christmas Eve candlelight communion service. We do that here at Eikon. And I used to do this growing up. We would always go to my grandparents' house on Christmas Eve. And I'll never forget, she had this house and it would be packed full of cousins and aunts and uncles. And there'd be food cooking and we'd do all kinds of different games and the white elephant gift exchange. Anybody love white elephant gift exchanges? Yes, we would do that. And then at the end of the evening, me and some of my cousins and some of the aunts and uncles, we would all walk down to the church for Christmas Eve service. She lived a few blocks away and we'd walk through the snow and we'd play and goof around. And I loved my grandma's Christmas Eve service. One of the services was always at midnight, which as a pastor, that just sounds dumb. You know, like I don't want to be putting on a service at midnight, but we would go to those services. And the reason, I gotta be honest, the reason I loved my grandma's Christmas Eve services probably weren't for all the best reasons. It was this little country church. She lived in Shelbyville, Illinois, probably a place that none of you have heard of. It was this little country church. It was an older church. And I loved going because you never knew what was going to happen. It was sometimes a little crazy. Like for instance, again, these services were late. There was the time that my cousin fell asleep while holding a lit candle and dropped it. And the floors were all wood and sloped down to the front. So we watched in horror as this like lit candle rolled down. There was a time that I, while praying, instructed by the pastor, being a good little person, prayed and I had my bulletin in one hand and candle in the other, and they got a little too close together and I lit my bulletin on fire. Got in a little bit of trouble for that one. And I kid you not, my sister Angie, she's our kids pastor. She was in first service. She can attest to this. I promise you, there was one service that they had this little balcony thing that overhung, and someone was praying and must have fallen asleep and dropped their candle from the balcony on top of an old lady's blue hair and like lit part of it on fire. There was a time that a child puked in a poinsettia during a choir piece. I mean, it was wonderful. It was Christmas magic every year at my grandma's Christmas Eve service. But nothing will top one year. They would have these different choirs, and a lot of times they'd be kids choirs, or it'd be like grandkids of the different people that went to the church, the congregants. But they had this adult choir that came sometimes, and so the adult choir went up on stage, and an adult choir isn't a choir unless you have choir robes, right? Anybody remember choir robes? Yeah. And they would go up on stage and they all in their choir robes and they're all singing. And then there's this one older gentleman right towards the middle that partway through the song, he's singing and he's real excited, kind of opens up his arms and he kind of pauses and he looks at his arm and he looks to the other side and he starts reaching over and he had lost his arm. Now follow me on this. He reaches over and he starts hitting his shoulder, making more and more of a scene. Like as everyone's singing, people are looking over and at first he's like, oh, oh, oh. And then he gets louder and louder and he's grabbing his sleeve going, oh, oh, oh. And like everyone's like looking at him until another gentleman next to him kind of grabs him by the shoulder and finds his arm and like feeds it through the sleeve. The thing is, this was an older gentleman that had early stages of dementia and forgot to put his arm through the sleeve and thought he lost his arm. So he's like grabbing the sleeve of his arm, like freaking out. But the best part, what made this like hilarious and really heartwarming is the whole rest of the time he was like smiling and holding his arm. And he was singing so big. Like Jesus did a Christmas miracle that night for that man. Like God grew an arm out. Like it was the most heartwarming. He was smiling so big. Like it was a good night. It was a silent night for him. Like it would, those services for me, like every year I'd be like, oh man, I cannot wait till Christmas Eve service. Again, for some of these wrong reasons, right? And sometimes, in kind of a different sort of way, sometimes the holidays can be a little like that. I mean, there are so many things going on. There's Christmas parties, there's gifts, there's white elephant gift exchange. Maybe going to in-laws for you isn't quite as excitable as that. And you got travel and all these things. And there's so many things that take our attention off of the real reason. You see, the reason we were having that candlelight service wasn't so we could watch older people lose their arms. It wasn't so that we could watch children puke in poinsettias, as entertaining as that is. See, there was a reason we were gathering. There's a reason behind this season that God, the Creator, became creation. That we can experience this thrill of hope. That no matter what 2017 looked like for you, there's hope for 2018. If 2017 was a difficult year for you, there's hope because Jesus comes to bring us new life. And in that moment, I would forget and I'd lose my focus. And let's be honest, it happens to all of us, doesn't it? I mean, all of us, if we're not careful, there's this gravity that pulls us away from the true meaning, that pulls our attention to family and travel, gift giving. This time of year, there's one other thing that's really important. Star Wars, like we're all pumped up and excited, which I'm with you, right? Like the 15th, baby, yes, like we're ready for it, right? And there's all these things that we get excited about and that draw our attention away from true meaning. I mean, we have to realize that what this is all about isn't all the trappings. And as parents, I get it. We want our Christmas to be magical for our kids. As kids, it's normal to get excited about the presents and the food and the family. And I get it. There's work parties and all kinds of things happening. There's so many things that pull us away from the true meaning. You see, what really happened 2,000 years ago is in an unexpected act of redemption and reconciliation, God gives us the gift, gives humanity the gift of hope. Amen. See, that's what this is all about. In a moment that human history didn't expect it. In a corner of the world that nobody thought anything would happen. In fact, in that little town of Bethlehem, people would say, nothing good can come from this town. I mean, nothing good can come from that. And yet, from that town came Jesus, our Savior, the one that brings hope to the world. Amen. You see, so the question I want to pose to you today is how can we get back the cause of all of this celebration? We see the celebration, we partake in it, we're a part of the decorations and setting things up and the Christmas parties. But how on earth, in a time like this when there's so many things pulling for our attention, can we get back to that? See, how do you see the hope of humanity in the midst of all this hustle? Because come on, let's be honest, there's hustle and there's no way to avoid it. There's no way to get out of it, to extricate ourselves from all the hustle. We still have to stay within it. So how in the midst of that hustle, in the midst of sometimes the hassle, how can we remember the true meaning? How can we get our eyes back on Jesus? And what's interesting is the Christmas story contains an answer for us. It contains an answer that so many times we just skip over. We read about the birth of Jesus and we're like, yeah, I know what happens. He's born in a manger every single time, and to be quite honest, as I was getting ready for these Christmas messages, as a pastor, when you preach on Christmas, it's like every time he's born in Bethlehem, it's like there's no new twist on it. Like he's still born of a virgin, every single year. It's kind of the same thing. And if we're not careful, we can get into this mode and we're like, yeah, the Christmas story, and maybe we read it on Christmas Eve night or morning of, or we hear some pastor talk about it, and it's like, yeah. But within this story comes some clues for us that how we can remember Jesus in the midst of the hustle and midst of the hassle, how we can remember him in all of that. You see, because what we have is we have Mary and Joseph, and Mary's pregnant. And the Caesar has called for the census to be done. So everyone has to travel back to their hometowns. So Mary, 9 months pregnant, has to travel, and she's betrothed to Joseph. So they're traveling, and this is traveling 2,000 years ago. This isn't like jump in the minivan and throw on a DVD in the screen. You know, like my kids, when they travel, they're like, I'm bored. And I'm like, you have an iPad, an iPod, a movie screen? Like, I played with a paper clip for 12 hours when I was in a car. You know, like you kind of go old person again, you know, and you're like, they're like, oh, the reception's bad. And you're like, you have mobile internet from the sky, you know, like don't. Anyway, Mary and Joseph didn't have that, right? They're traveling on a donkey. It's uncomfortable. They're traveling this long distance and there's hassle and there's hustle. Mary's pregnant, probably very uncomfortable. And they're going and they finally get to Bethlehem where Joseph, his family is from, and they get there. And now all the hotels are filled. All the inns are filled. Mary's probably like, I told you you should have left earlier. You should have jumped on Expedia and booked it, you know, whatever. You know, and there you can imagine the tension that's there. I mean, she's trying to give birth. And you see, sometimes we get it. We see the nativity scene. It gets all doctored up and we think it's pretty. These are real people. They're experiencing this hassle of trying to get in. And they go to this innkeeper and the innkeeper's like, sorry, there's no room. In fact, Luke records this, and here's the way Luke recounts this. He says, so it was that while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. And as she brought forth her firstborn son, it was and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room in the inn. See, the innkeeper had an opportunity when they came to him. He saw hassle. He saw hustle. He knew there was no room for him. And he said, listen, we don't have room in the inn, but we've got this manger around back. And I get it, our nativity scenes dress it up and you got the little star at the top of this perfect little peak. But back then, 2,000 years ago, they wouldn't waste that kind of energy on a stable for animals. Many times it was nothing more than a little hewn out cave on the backside of the inn. And this is likely where the manger was, in this damp, dark cave with animal stuff all over the floor. It was not a clean and pretty place. And that's where they have to go to. So this innkeeper had this opportunity. He had this chance. The innkeeper could have been the host of heaven's son, but instead all he saw was hustle and hassle. Imagine how the story could have been different. Imagine if the innkeeper would have saw Mary and Joseph and said, you know what? Listen, I gotta be honest. We don't have any rooms available. We don't have anything. We don't have any space for you to stay, but I tell you what, why don't you stay with my wife and I? We've got some room. We can make some room. You can squeeze in. It may not be comfortable, but at least you've got a warm home that you can be in. At least you can be around people when you're traveling and giving birth to your child. Imagine how that story would have been different. Imagine if that innkeeper would have saw that opportunity for what it was. If he could have gone down in history to be the one that gave a home to the Christ, that opened his home up for that. How would history have been different for him? You see, it's always inconvenient to make room, but there's always blessing when we make room for Jesus. In this holiday season, I get it. It's gonna be inconvenient. It's gonna be difficult to make time, to carve out time when your kids are going, oh, we don't wanna read the story. We don't wanna, it's inconvenient, but there's always blessing when we'll take time and we make room for Jesus. You see, in this first Christmas story, we have evidence of that too. See, because it wasn't only the innkeeper that had an opportunity that very first Christmas. There was another group of individuals that had the same opportunity. See, on the backside of the desert, somewhere near Bethlehem, there were some shepherds keeping some sheep. And back then, I want you to imagine, I want you to really put yourself there. They've been out all day long in the hot sun, taking care of their sheep. And there's likely what they would do is there were multiple shepherds and they'd all have their own herds with them and they'd gather them up at night for safety and they'd create a pen of some kind with one entrance and they would lay down there at the entrance so that they would be awoken if a sheep tried to get out. Or maybe they'd find a cave that they can kind of block off a little bit and lay there at the entrance of the cave. So I want you to imagine these shepherds, you've worked all day, you finally got all the sheep put away. You've had to account for every single one, make sure you haven't lost any. You said, okay, they're all good. The sheep are bedding down. You make a fire and you finally sit down after that long day. You're sitting around the fire, you're relaxing, you're talking with your friends, and finally the night is done and you're gonna finally get some rest. And then the sky explodes with activity. Angels appear before them and they say what just happened in Bethlehem. This is an announcement of this coming king. The Christ has come. The awaited Messiah has been born in Bethlehem. And then the angels disappear. See, what the angels didn't say is, okay, guys, pack it up, time to go, let's go. Jesus needs some friends right now, so why don't you go say hey to Jesus? They just announced the coming king, that's it. They didn't give them any requirements. They didn't tell them what they had to do. They just, and how amazing is it that God gets to tell anyone, and he tells some lowly shepherds, already giving us clues to what the real kingdom is gonna look like, that it didn't come to the power structures and power authorities, but yet came to lowly shepherds, that the gospel is found there. So it comes to these shepherds, and they have an opportunity, and Luke records what they do. Luke says, now they're in the same country where shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over the flock at night. The sky explodes, the angels appear, tell them about what's happened in Bethlehem, and here's what the shepherds do. So it was when the angels had gone away from them into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, let us now go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us. See, they had the same hassle. I mean, think about they're having to get all the sheep, wake them up and get them out of the pen. They have to travel with all the sheep, which isn't an easy thing. We don't know how far they have to travel, but they have to travel across the countryside to get to Bethlehem. And then once they get there, the hassle isn't over because they just can't leave the sheep to be on their own. So they likely have to take turns and go in one or two at a time in to see baby Jesus and to see Mary and Joseph. I picture them like rock, paper, scissors. I think that's what you did back then to like, I don't know, figure it out, cast lots or whatever. I don't know. And they're going in one or two at a time. They're seeing Jesus, and the other ones are saying, hey, listen, let me take care of it. I'll go ahead and serve you. I'll watch these sheep. You go in first. Why don't you go? You see, what they could have done is they could have just sat around the fire and gone, man, that was crazy. Did you see that? Did we put something in this tea? Like what? Was this real? This really happened? And I mean, they could have sat there and told stories and, I can't wait to tell my wife, this is crazy. No one's going to believe this. But instead, they had that same opportunity that the innkeeper did. They were presented with hassle and hustle just like the innkeeper. And yet, these lowly, seemingly insignificant shepherds got to be a part of the biggest moment in the history of creation. They got to be a part of it. They got to see the Christ. They got to see the birth of Jesus just because they were presented with the same opportunity, but they chose to see it with different eyes. They chose to say, you know what? No, I don't see this as a hassle. I see this as an opportunity. I see this as a chance to lean in. And guys, I get it. There's hassle in our lives. Christmas can be busy. The commercials are running and kids are making lists, and you're like, I can't buy you a pony and a car. They're giving you their lists of everything they want. You're thinking like, how are we gonna make this work this year? And you gotta travel, and you got that crazy uncle that you don't wanna see again. And there's all this hassle and all these things, and there's that Christmas party, and your boss is always weird, and you're thinking about all of these things. Or come on, let's get honest. Some of you college students here, you got finals. And you're like just barely, you are awake on the back of like no-dos in coffee, like you just have a drip set up, right? Like if you could invest in like Red Bull right now, you would, and you're just trying to keep your head above water because finals is all you can think about because it's a hassle this time of year. There's a lot of hustle this time of year. There's a lot of things you have this weight and this responsibility that you feel that you want it to be perfect for your family. I'm not a grandparent, but I've talked to grandparents. I've talked to my parents. And they say sometimes they feel it even stronger as grandparents. They just want to provide, make it perfect. And it's hassle. And there's a hustle to it. And it's going to take work. But we have an opportunity to slow down and take a step back. You see, I want to challenge us to not be like the innkeeper, but yet be like the sheep keepers. To be like them and say, you know what, even though it's a hassle, we're gonna lean in and experience this moment with Jesus this year. See, I wanna close with another story, and one you wouldn't typically think about at Christmas time. And this is a story in Israel's history about one of the patriarchs of the Jewish faith. There's a man by the name of Jacob, and he's traveling this long distance. He's traveling about 500 miles. And he's walking along the path, and it's getting late, and he decides he's gonna bed down for the night. So he kind of steps off the path, and the Bible tells us that he grabs a rock as a pillow, and he lays down there in the grass and the dirt and sleeps for the night. And all of a sudden, as he's sleeping, he has this vision, he has this dream. And he sees this stairway leading up to heaven. And he sees angels going up and angels going down. And then he looks, and there's God standing beside the stairwell. And he wakes up and he realizes where he's been. And here's what he says. He says this. He says, the Lord is surely in this place, and I didn't even know it. It's like I was walking through and my eyes were closed to this greater reality. And he's been here all along. How holy is this place? This must be the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. See, Jacob went to sleep that night, not realizing what was going on all around him, not realizing the opportunity that was before him. He was thinking about how far he'd gone and how far he has to go. And he's ticked off that he has a rock for a pillow. And and he goes to sleep and his eyes are really opened. See, Jacob fell asleep blind to it, but he woke up to a greater reality. And my prayer for you this Christmas is that you would wake up to a greater reality, that you would see that Christmas is so much more than just all the parties and all the stuff and all the presents and you wake up to this greater reality that God has been here all along. See, I don't believe that there was a special place about where he went down. I don't believe that there was some special gate to heaven that existed there, and if we could only find it, I believe that's representative to all around us all the time. Jesus said the kingdom of God is among you right now, that the gate to heaven is right here, that our actions have the opportunity to bring heaven down to earth, that we've got this choice. See, the goal of this Christmas season is to wake up to a greater reality that's been around us all along. That's what we want to do today. My challenge for you is sometime this week that you would put this into action. I don't know what this week has for you. College students, I know you've got finals. Parents, you probably have a lot going on. There's work and there's travel and there's all these things. But my challenge is sometime between the end of this service and next Sunday, would you take time out, just you, to pull away and to focus on Jesus? Because he's right there in the midst of the hustle. And if you'll just slow down enough, I believe you can open your eyes and see Jesus around you. That you can see this holiday for what it is. And yeah, you'll still have to travel. You'll still have the stuff. But you'll see that as an opportunity to lean in, to experience what it's all about, just like those shepherds. That's my prayer for all of you, that sometime this week, whether you're driving and you decide to turn off the radio and put on some worship music, maybe you wake up a little early and you get a cup of coffee and you read that Christmas story and you lean in. Maybe to gather your kids around, it's not too late. Maybe you buy an Advent calendar or an Advent wreath and you go through that and you say, we're gonna do this every night leading up to Christmas Eve. Whatever it is, that you find a way that you lean in this Christmas season. You recognize what it's all about. One way, one opportunity that we have that I'm gonna present to you right now that we can put this into action, that we can put this into practice, is in a moment, we're gonna take up our annual first gift offering. It's something that we do every year. As we challenge you to give your first and your best gift to God. In a season of gift giving that we give to friends and families, that we give our first gift back to God. This is above and beyond our tithes and our offerings. And we say, God, we want to give this to you to honor you. And this year we're saying that we want this to be one day that change eKids. Because all of the proceeds, in different years we've done different things. There's a year that we've helped a preschool that was just starting build their art room. Last year we gave it to Vintage Church as we helped plant a church in Southeast Austin. And this year they're doing this very same thing. But this year, in 2017, this offering is gonna go to our eKids ministry, our kids church. You see, because as this room fills up, the kids' rooms over there get really filled up. And we're asking you to give towards this offering, and we're gonna use these funds so that we can build out, just on the other side of this wall, 3 amazing kids environments for our elementary age kids. Because our kids are coming in, sometimes they've been bullied in the week, they've been left out, and they come here and they get to experience hope. Because they're not the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today. And they get to experience that thrill of hope that we get to experience. See, I'm a product of kids' church. I may not be standing here today if it wasn't for kids' church leaders and a kids' church environment investing into me. We want our kids to have that same experience, don't we? So we want to expand our kids area, add some classrooms. We're going to add a secure bathroom that's just dedicated for kids, add another check-in area. And this offering is going to go towards that. And the reason we're calling it One Day to Change eKids is we're asking you all to participate. We've been talking about taking up this offering today and again on the 17th, where we're asking, would you consider giving 1 day's wage? Would you give 1 day's pay? Out of 365 days a year, would you give 1 day to change e-kids. Because if we all do this, if we genuinely all do this, if we come together, we can do it. And I'm gonna be honest, it's what it's gonna take to do that, it's big. The need is great, but I believe that God has supplied the answer to that need, and it's sitting in these chairs right now. It's gonna come through your hands. As you say, you know what, I don't know what I can do, but I can do this. Maybe some of you typically in this first gift offering give more than that. That's great. Praise God, we'll let you do that. You can continue to do that. For those of you who usually don't give in this offering, I want to challenge you to step up, to give big, so we can see this happen for our kids, so we can give them a great environment. So in a moment, the host team's gonna come down, pass some buckets. The worship team's gonna play one final song. You can remain in your seats. They'll give us some directions when we can stand and sing together. The host team's gonna pass some buckets by. If you came here with your spouse or a loved one, you wanna lean over and decide, hey, what is it that we can give? What is it that we wanna give in this offering? You can do that now. If you write a check, just on the memo line, write first gift. If you're giving via text, as always, you can give, just use the keyword first gift, and you can text any amount to 512-872-3450. So the example would just be $100 first gift. And you text that phrase to that number, and you can give via text as well. It'll give you a form if you haven't given via text yet, so you can fill that out and give via text anytime. So I just want to thank you all so much. I want to thank Eikon Church, all of you, for being a church that leans into moments like this. That when you see hassle, when you see hustle, you lean into those moments so that you can see Jesus work in the midst of all the hassle. And I believe if we can do this, if we can be like those shepherds, if we can say, hey, listen, I know it's gonna be a hassle for us to get the sheep out of here, but let's experience the birth of Christ. Let's experience that today. We have that same opportunity this week and this moment right now. So I wanna thank you so much for your faithfulness, for your giving towards first gift and everything that happens around here at Eikon Church. Let's pray.